Genesis chapter 25, be reading from verses 1 to 18. Hear the word of the Lord. Abraham took another wife, whose name was Keturah. She bore him Zimram, Jokshan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Jokshan fathered Sheba and Dedan. The sons of Dedan were Asherim, Letushim, and Leumim. The sons of Midian were Ephah, Epher, Hanak, Abida, and Eldah. All these were the children of Keturah. Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac, but to the sons of his concubines, Abraham gave gifts. And while he was still living, he sent them away from his son Isaac eastward to the east country. These are the days of the years of Abraham's life, 175 years. Abraham breathed his last and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. Isaac and Ishmael, his sons, buried him in the cave of Machpelah and the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar, the Hittite, east of Mamre, the field that Abraham purchased from the Hittites. There Abraham was buried with Sarah, his wife, after the death of Abraham. God blessed Isaac, his son, and Isaac settled at Beer-lahai-roi. These are the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's servant, bore to Abraham. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael, named in the order of their birth. Nebaioth, the firstborn of Ishmael, and Kedar, Abiel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jetur, Nephish, and Kedemah. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names by their villages and by their encampments, 12 princes according to their tribes. These are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years. He breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people. They settled from Havilah to Shur, which is opposite Egypt in the direction of Assyria. He settled over against all his kinsmen. May the Lord add his blessings to the reading of his holy word. Well, do you have anything that you just love? A hobby, some entertainment, a food? You enjoy it so much you can't understand why anyone doesn't also like it. Could be basketball or football, swimming, the beach, concerts, maybe a particular music group, your favorite star, a video game, or Hong Kong soap operas, or even, can you believe it, strawberries. Maybe you love strawberries. There are just some things just so appealing to you, you can't fathom how anyone else doesn't like them. Who doesn't like strawberries? I mean, what kind of crazy person does not like strawberries? What crazy person doesn't like the movie Titanic? Everybody loves Titanic. You just love it so much you naturally try to spread the good news. When you find something so good that you enjoy, if you see a wonderfully entertaining movie, you just love it, one of the first things you'll do is tell someone else, you've just got to go see Zootopia 2. Or if you're older, you just got to see Stalag 17. No, you really do. Or, of course, Titanic. Everyone loves Titanic. You love a new restaurant, and so you tell others if you found some new restaurant you just discovered, you won't believe it, I've just found a place called McDonald's. You'll love it. Or maybe China Dragon. You got to go. Maybe it's as simple as saying, turn up the radio. You'll love this song. I love it. You'll love it too. But then something odd happens. What you love it so much, you find that others don't find it so appealing. They listen to your favorite song and they turn down the radio before it's over. Then they try your favorite restaurant and they don't care to ever return. They watch Titanic and can't wait for Leonardo DiCaprio to finally freeze to death and get this dreadful movie over with. And so you realize that what I love and enjoy so much, it's not for everyone. And so we learned to say, you should see that movie. Try that restaurant. Listen to this song. But I know, it's not for everyone. Some people have their taste, they're different from mine. They like or love different things than me. And so we accept that, even if it seems strange to us. When people eat things that we find inedible, like durians. Who in the world would ever even eat one of those? Or love movies that we can hardly sit through, like Titanic. We understand. Some people are different than me. It's not for everyone. It's not my taste, especially not for me. But we all accept the principle that every good thing we enjoy, may not be for everybody. Some people just won't like it. And the same is true for Jesus too. for salvation, for the truths that we say bring life, for a relationship with the Lord. We must say with Scripture now, there is only one way to be saved. There's only one door to salvation, one name by which to be saved, and yet we have to admit it's not for everyone. In this passage, we see that God's covenant, his commitment to save and to bless some people, it began when Abraham was introduced, but we see it's not for everybody. It's the only way everyone must take for eternal life, but it's not for everyone. We see that here in three parts. First, the separation, then the satisfaction, and finally the specification. First, there is separation. The story of Abraham has ended in chapter 24 with him finally finding a wife for Isaac. God made a covenant with Abraham to make him the father of many nations and to be a blessing to them all. And by this point in the Bible, just 25 short chapters into it, we know that whatever God is going to do, imagine if you were reading the Bible for the very first time, you didn't know anything about it, and you realize whatever God is going to do to reverse this fall into sin, this catastrophe that happened when sin came, and return us to the original paradise, however God is going to do that, he's going to do it through Isaac, and not anyone else. That promise to bring a blessing is not for everyone. But here we see that the promise to be a father to many nations, we see it was physically fulfilled. Abraham had another wife after Sarah has died, Keturah, who bore him many children, many of them growing up to be the fathers of their own nations and tribes. Now, if we lived in ancient Israel when Genesis was first written, we'd recognize many of these names. You know, we read these names, and this is one of these weird names, hard to pronounce. We recognize them as many of the names of the countries around us, like Midian, surrounding areas or ethnic groups. We'd be amazed at how many of our neighboring countries also originated from Abraham. He's their father too, we would think. The promise that he would be the father of a multitude was physically fulfilled. But we're also shown here that the physical fulfillment wasn't the main thing. That's really not the main issue that God is concerned about. He's only concerned about the one that comes from Isaac. So the physical fulfillment is not the heart or the goal of the covenant that the Lord made with Abraham. In fact, all of that, this physical fulfillment, these many groups that came from Abraham, are just small tokens of God's blessing on him. That physical fatherhood of physical nations is not the most important thing. As though the promises to Abraham were just a matter of mere flesh and blood. Descendants just naturally came from him. That's what it was about when he said God promised he would be a father of many nations. Now, literally he is, but is that really the main thing? That he's the literal father of literal nations of the Middle East? No, of course not. What is most important, we see right here, is the promise of spiritual blessings made to Abraham, manifest in the supernatural son, that miracle child. A lot of natural children, but he only had one supernatural child, Isaac. Abraham had a lot of children through Keturah. There are 6 sons listed here, and there were probably other daughters that aren't listed, and he had other concubines and still more children, but those natural blessings, as nice as they are, were not really what the covenant with Abraham was about. To prove that, it's not just my opinion, to prove it, there is a separation. The sons of Keturah and their sons, so Abraham's grandsons, they're listed. Then in verse 5, Abraham gave all his estate to Isaac. That is, as we would say, he made Isaac the sole beneficiary of his will. Okay, you figure, why is that? Why Isaac? He's all these other sons. He gave lots of gifts to his other children. I'm sure he was generous to them. But to Isaac alone is given the inheritance. That's because it's through him alone that God is going to fulfill his covenant with Abraham. The Lord made a covenant in chapter 15 in which he bound himself. The Lord bound himself by a promise to bless Abraham, to make him a blessing. And he put Abraham in a deep sleep just to show him that the fulfillment of the promise would come by God's action alone. Nothing's required of you, Abraham. God's going to do it. And so he knocked him out. And when Abraham got impatient and tried to help God, the product of that was Ishmael, the child of the flesh, of human self-help. But he is not the one. God's commitment to save his people will be fulfilled by God's work alone, grace alone. Here it came through Isaac alone, the one child Abraham had who was born spontaneously. Salvation is by grace alone. But it's not for everyone. That it's not for everyone is seen in the reality of separation. Abraham separates his children, the supernatural, the one of grace, and the natural, the ones of the flesh. The natural are sent away. Notice in verse 6, Abraham separates his children and sends most of them away, it says, to the east, where he originally came from. Assume that same place where, remember, Abraham's servant in chapter 25 is sent to get contact with their family, find a wife for Isaac. They could go back there. They go back to their relatives. There they could intermarry and eventually merge in with the rest of the world. But Isaac, the supernatural son, he was to be different. He inherits everything. And so God's promise was carried on through Isaac alone, not those natural sons and daughters. There is a separation. And some are separated out. Some are sent away. Notice clearly Abraham separates and he sends away. We accept that some people don't like our favorite foods, our movies, because we think, well, ultimately it's their choice. It's free will. It's preferences. It's taste. To each his own, we say. We don't want our free will stomped on, and so we give others freedom to have their own choices. We don't want others pushing foods on us we don't like durians or Titanic on me, and so we don't push McDonald's and La La Land or whatever your favorite movie is on them. And many people bring the same way of thinking to religion, to knowing the Lord. They think, well, about God? Well, to each his own. I like God. They don't. Well, that's, they have their taste. I believe in Jesus. They don't. And some of these people that think like that, they may be genuine Christians. They may believe in Jesus. They're just kind of worldly. Perhaps they go to church. But for other people, they think their faith is, well, it's for me. It's not for everyone. They can find what those other people, they can find what they want in Buddhism, materialism, hedonism, living for pleasure, moralism, just being a nice, sweet, moral, good neighbor. My way may not be for everyone, but everyone will eventually reach the same destination, they think. Oh, there may be a few extreme cases when people have to be sent away to be tormented in hell, but those are really rare, they think. You have to really mess up, deserve that, to get hell. You have to really, really go far out. You have to be an Osama bin Laden to get that. But for everyone else, they think, their path may be different. Their preferences, how to get there, may be different. My path is not for everyone, they think. Like we're talking about taste in music or food. They apply that to Jesus. But in the end, we'll all be in the same place. That's kind of a common idea in our culture today. The destination, heaven, is for everyone. There's just different paths there. Broad and many are the roads that lead to life, people think. But here we see the opposite. There is only one way through God's miracle that he did by giving them Isaac. And there is separation. There's the supernatural and the natural. And God only works through the supernatural. The destinations are different. Only Isaac and his descendants, Isaac's descendants, remain in the promised land. While all the products of the flesh, Ishmael, the sons of Keturah, all of our own efforts, all of our own good intentions, all of our other religions, they are sent away back to the world. Because the destinations are different, there must be a separation. When the Son of Man comes, Jesus said in his very last teaching in Matthew 25, he will separate the sheep from the goats. Those who will inherit the promise, who will receive the kingdom prepared for them by the Father, they will be separated from those who will not receive that kingdom. The kingdom is not for everyone. But this passage here, Genesis chapter 25, shows us that separation isn't all for later, for the end, for the final judgment. It's not just in the future. It goes on, it is going on right now. Abraham sent his natural children away, separating them from his one supernatural son, and that goes on right now. As the word of God is proclaimed right now, it separates those who will believe it from those who will not. Those who hear the voice of God speaking to them, maybe through a friend sharing with them, through a sermon, a conversation, Bible reading, a song, a beautiful song. They hear the gospel through it. They believe, they respond, they inherit the promises. They come to life. They enter the promised land. They're one of Abraham's children because of their faith. And truly fulfilling the promise to Abraham, those people are from all kinds of nations and ethnic groups and races. There are Africans and Asians and Europeans or Indians to whom God gives the promise. He gives a gift, an inheritance, the kingdom prepared for them by their father. But others hear the same thing. They could hear the best sermon. They could hear the same sermon others heard and were converted by. The most beautiful song, the most appealing invitation, the most rational, factual defense of the faith. And yet they couldn't care less. And they are separated. And they go back to the world, away from God. And the promise to Abraham, even if Abraham is their physical father, is not for them. Second, there is the satisfaction in verses 7 to 11. Abraham dies satisfied. 175 years. Notice how verse 8 dwells on his death. He breathes his last, literally he expires. He died in a good old age. Some people think that's a contradiction. Have a good old age. Well, but Abraham had it. An old man, says full of years, full like a glass of water is full, right to the brim. It can't take any more. He had as many years as he could contain. He was fulfilled, just as God had promised that he would be in Genesis chapter 15, verse 15. And finally, he was gathered to his people. And notice that comes before the burial, before the funeral, in verses 9 and 10. So it's not a euphemism for being buried. It doesn't mean gathered to his people. I mean he's buried with his family. Some people are really obsessed. Their body's got to be buried in their plot right beside their husband or wife or whatever in their family. Well, no, that's not what he's talking about. Not a euphemism. It's not talking about the body where it is. It says Abraham himself, is gathered to his people who are beyond. And in all this, he's satisfied. Death for the servant of God who has lived by faith is not the final frustration. Now, if you live for the pleasures of the body, death is frustrating. Can only be frustrating as you experience your body declining and aching and failing you. And then it dies and you can't enjoy it anymore. If you live for natural things, material things, for money and all that it can buy, well, death means you lose all of that. You lose. And we're all going to die. That's the silly thing about living for making money. Because at the end, you know you're going to lose it all. Why are you living for something you know you will lose at the end? So death is the ultimate frustration. But if you live for the Lord by faith, well, death is still the last enemy. It is what is ultimately frustrated. For you, there is satisfaction. There can be a good old age. There can be fulfillment. There can even be a reunion with all those others people who also trusted God. Satisfaction instead of frustration. There are the promises now and the fulfillment not yet. Now he can be satisfied with a good old age, with many fruitful years, now with having a cave in the promised land, first to bury his wife and now to bury himself. But that's all that's happened now, so far. The promises are satisfying, but they're not completely satisfied yet. The cave itself that he bought, remember chapter 23, the whole chapter just on buying that little cave? Why do you have a whole chapter on that? Well, it's a token of the whole land that he will get eventually. It's a token of the land of having a place to live in God's presence, which is still not yet. And death itself still has to be born. Now we all still suffer its sting, but because we so believe in the resurrection, when it comes time to die, we can have satisfaction. We have satisfaction because we expect a full victory over sin and its byproduct, death. It may be not yet, but faith has made you so sure that you can even breathe your last satisfied. But that too is not for everyone. Notice in verse 17, this quick account of the death of Ishmael. All the basic verbs are the same as for the death of Abraham. He breathed his last, he died, he was gathered to his people, to those who had gone to death before him. But all of the descriptions of satisfaction that are in Abraham's death, that overflowed that account of his death, are missing. Ishmael died at 137 years, which seems old to us, but it was not a good old age. Notice it doesn't say he had a good old age. He wasn't full. It doesn't say he was full of years, does it? It doesn't say that for him. Was it brimming over with years? Couldn't take any more. Ishmael just died. Abraham died with satisfaction. We experience satisfaction now because we believe God's promises will be satisfied. And notice they are satisfied one way, through the offspring of Abraham. The first offspring, Isaac, ultimately, the offspring, capital O, Christ. And it's not for everyone. It's not for Ishmael. He's there at the cave of Machpelah. He's at the funeral, respectfully, solemnly burying his father. Abraham had pleaded with God that God would accept Ishmael. That Ishmael would be accepted by God as the one to carry on the promise. Remember that? Lord, let it be Ishmael. Accept him. Abraham loved Ishmael. And he wanted him to be the one to whom that God will work to be a blessing to the nations. He wanted Ishmael to be the fulfiller of the promise. But here, God, again, he makes a separation. It's not by man's will. It's not by man's choice. It's God's choice. 2 sons respectfully bury their father, but only one is blessed. In verse 9, Isaac and Ishmael are Abraham's sons, plural, burying him. In verse 11, Isaac alone is called his son, and he alone settles in the promised land. Beer Lahai Roi is the place where the Lord promised Hagar that she would have a son. Turned out to be Ishmael. That God would look after that son. And now Isaac lives there, the same place. He's the supernatural son, whose descendants, supernatural descendants, will be protected forever. God's promises will be satisfied in the satisfaction of his people. But it's not for everyone. Finally, there is a specification. Abraham has 2, what do you call them, major sons? You don't want to call them legitimate sons. I guess they're all legitimate. 2 major sons through Sarah or her proxy, Ishmael and Isaac. But the grace of God specifically distinguishes, sets apart one. The grace of God specifies one. This is the scandal of specificity, that some are chosen and some are not. He had 6 sons through Keturah, but they're separated out. They're sent away. But Ishmael too, he's a son. He's present at the funeral. And yet as God chooses sovereignly who he will work through, he leaves Ishmael out. Ishmael has 12 sons, 12 princes. Most of them end up being founders of different groups, of tribes, even of nations like Midian, showing that once again, God's promise to Abraham to be the father of a multitude, again, that was physically fulfilled. But that the physical fulfillment was really not the important fulfillment. It's really not the main story. That was kind of a sideshow. It's a bonus. Like God said, okay, I promise to be father of many nations. You know what? I'll do it physically too, just to show you I can. But that's really not the main issue. What God was really doing wasn't for everyone, not even for those 12 princes of Ishmael that Ishmael fathered, those 12 princes, each grandsons of Abraham. The Lord specifically chose one son of the 8 known sons of Abraham. One son, specifically chosen. The Lord specifies the supernatural son is the one. Born to a woman well past childbearing age, even if she could have borne children naturally, which she couldn't because she was barren, infertile, we would say today. The supernatural one was the one. No other. In the end, by the way, it'll be the supernatural son born to a virgin who's the one. Here, God chose that one specifically, the supernatural son. In other words, the Lord chose, he elected, is the theological term, he elected Isaac. This illustrates for us what it means to be elect, the doctrine of, in theological terms, the doctrine of election. It means that God specifically chooses that one. He chooses the ones that his salvation is for. It's not like some imagine, well, that, any of the sons or the grandsons of Isaac could have inherited the promises if they had believed, if only they had done the right things. It all depended on them. as though Abraham had an inheritance, the promise from God, and anyone could get it if they wanted. It all depends on them, if they freely choose to. It's on the table right there for any of the sons and the grandsons to take. That's the way many people think. It's up to them. It's up to their free will. And it just so happened that Isaac was the one who believed. And that's not the story of Genesis. Not the story here, is it? That's not what's going on. It is God who specifies. It's God who elects. He elects who will and who will not get the blessing. In other words, most people recognize, most Christians, when they think about these things, they recognize there's a specification. There's some who believe and some who don't. Some people who have salvation and some who do not. Some who are blessed and others who are not. That there are promises from God, some get them and others do not get them. Now, what's the difference between the two? What's the crucial thing that makes the difference between those who are saved and those who are not, blessed or not? What is it? Is it us? Is it our choices? Or what we do? And we recognize that Christ, the one who fulfills the promise to Isaac, is not for everyone, even though he is the only way, but not everyone choose him. Most think, that whatever it is that separates those two groups, those who are saved from those who are not, it's their choice. It's their choice. They separated themselves. They qualified or disqualified themselves. They cast the deciding vote. Some people like to say, even some Christians like to say, well, God votes for you and Satan votes against you. You have to break the deadlock. You have to cast the deciding vote. No! That's not what it says. Here, the promises of God are not for everyone. But why? Here we come to one of the most offensive things about the gospel. We're all taught to realize that some of the things that we love are not for everyone because some people have their own taste. That they have the things that they love and maybe we don't share them or whatever. It's just the way it is. That's life. But some march to the beat of a different drummer. We're told and we accept that, okay. And we apply that to our faith. Well, it's not for everyone. Some choose to be Buddhists. Some choose to be Muslims. Some choose to be atheists. Whatever. And that's true. But that's not the whole truth. The whole truth is that behind or beyond our choices, whether we are an Isaac who inherits the promises or an Ishmael who doesn't, ultimately God chooses. Yes, true, we choose. Don't hear me saying that these people didn't choose. Isaac didn't choose God or Ishmael chose against God. Don't hear me say I'm not arguing that they did not make a choice. But why did they make that choice? What ultimately was behind them? Is it just their free will, unaffected by anything else in the universe? Or does God's choice, determine our choices? Just as he chose to bring life into Sarah's dead womb, he chooses to bring life into our dead hearts. And so now that we have life, we're born again, we make our choice to believe. We make it freely, but we make it because God did the miracle of giving us life, of raising us from spiritual death, so that we can then, because he's raised us, then we trust him. And that's where our faith comes from, a miracle-working God who specifies that some, like you, get his blessings. But that miracle isn't for everyone. Here the descendants of Ishmael thought that the promises of God were not for them. The same way that some think strawberries or the Titanic is not for them. Isaac can have it, they thought. We don't really care. I don't really care about all that covenant with the Most High God Grandpa Abraham used to talk about so much. Notice in verse 18, they settled outside the promised land. Describes where they were, and you kind of eyes start to glaze over. What does all this mean? It means they're outside the promised land. Why would they settle outside the promised land? They had heard the promises from God that this is the promised land. They knew what it was, and they thought, we don't care. We'll go elsewhere. They didn't care about God's promises. Not only did they put themselves outside, but then at the very end, they are against it. They turn out to be hostile people, opposed to the people of God. Ishmael is the father of enemies of God. And we naturally think, well, that's what they chose. They used their free will to be enemies, and that's true. They were not compelled against their will, as if God hadn't worked in their life, as if God made them enemies of God's people, made enemies of God. If God hadn't intervened, they would have, left to themselves, been friendly to God. They would have believed God. They would have sought God's promises. No, that's not what happens. They chose by their free will to be against God because God just left them to what's in them, to what they want. So they are condemned for their free choices. And those free choices come from their nature, from what they want, from who they are. Like in Romans chapter 1, Paul says, God gave them over to themselves. He didn't make them do sins that they wouldn't otherwise do. He's going to stop intervening. He's going to stop giving them grace. And they'll do what comes naturally to them. Because R.C. Sproul says, no one gets injustice from God. Some get mercy, and mercy is not for everyone. But even those who don't get mercy, they get justice. They don't get injustice. Now, some protest, well, but they could not repent. They could not believe. Well, that's not fair. Yeah, but they couldn't believe because it wasn't for them. Like strawberries in the Titanic are not for me. Please don't give them to me. Don't make me watch that movie again. It doesn't appeal to them. They don't want it. They don't want Jesus. Now, why did Osama bin Laden deserve to be shot for his crimes? Because he freely chose them? Because he's used his free will to do evil? Yeah, that's true, he did. But why? Why did he choose to do what he chose? Or to be more precise, why did he not choose to believe God, to follow Jesus? I know he had his own religion, and he said he believed in God, but his God was the true God. Why did he not choose to believe the true one? Because it wasn't for him. He didn't have the life, he didn't have the love for God to choose for him. God did not give it to him. Instead, left him up to what was in him, to what was for him. Then why do we choose to believe and to follow Jesus? It's because we're so much better? I'm so much better than that terrorist mastermind. Does God leave us up to what we want, what is in us? And because we're so much better people, we choose to believe? We choose? Because I'm such a good person, I chose not to be a terrorist? Is that what happened? No. Because of grace, God specified that we would believe. He specified this one will believe. Who specified that Isaac would get the blessing and not Ishmael? Who made that decision? Was it Isaac and Ishmael? Well, secondarily, kind of temporal, but not ultimately. It was ultimately the specifying of the electing grace of God. A professor of mine at seminary, Daniel Fuller, told the story of how we once picked up a hitchhiker and directed the conversation toward the gospel, and the hitchhiker had been raised in a church that taught about the electing grace of God, although imperfectly. And so he said, the hitchhiker said, I would like to believe, but I'm not one of the chosen. I'm not one of the elect. And the professor shot back, oh, if you'd really like to believe, you are one of the chosen. You're one of the elect. If you believe the promises of God are for you, you believe that the gospel is for you. You believe the gospel. If you believe that Jesus is for you, that's because, not because you're a more wiser person, a nobler person who believes truths while others don't. It's because God is for you. So he made in you a heart to believe. Here, it's not that the descendants of Ishmael really wanted to be part of the promised land. It's not that, you think, Abraham, why is he so unfair sending these people away? They didn't really want to be there. They didn't want to believe the promises to Abraham. They didn't want to believe them. Not as though they wanted to believe them, but they were excluded anyway against their will. Not as though they're kicked out of the promised land and crying to, oh, Father Abraham, please let us in your promised land. No, they didn't want to be there. They didn't want to be a part. They didn't want to believe because it wasn't for them. We could say, but that's not fair. It's not fair that there's specification, that God specifically chooses some people to get his blessings. Some are included and leaves the rest excluded. Yeah, it's true that's not fair. Whole thing's unfair. Unfair means everyone gets the same result. The fair thing would be exclude everybody. That Isaac be excluded too. Well, that'd be fair. Send everybody to hell. That's fair. Thank God he isn't fair that he specifically chooses to bless some. He doesn't have to do that, Why does he choose some? He could be fair, condemn everybody to hell. He doesn't have to do that. Why does he do it? It's grace. Grace isn't fair. That's why it's so Amazing. One of the most offensive things about the gospel is that it's not for everyone. It tells us that there is a separation, there's a specification. If salvation depended on our own will, or if it depended on our work, well, then it could be for everyone. Everyone could work their way into it. Everyone could make the right choice and all be saved. Anyone who wants to be saved could make the right choice. They could do the right work, join the right church, do the right sacraments. It's for everybody. It's freely available to all people if they just do it. Kind of like the way a store makes milk available. Milk is for everybody. What separates people who buy milk from those who don't is their own choice, or maybe their money. But it's for everyone. It's right there. But here we see that God's promises, the gospel, salvation, it's not for everybody. It's not for everyone. It's not available to all. It's not for Ishmael or the sons of Ishmael through Keturah. Those not graciously chosen, they're sent back to the world. Some become overtly hostile, even oppressive, in opposition to God and his promises, like the sons of Ishmael. When people are left to themselves, they're not specifically chosen by the Lord for the blessing. They soon become like the world, set against the church. The sons of Keturah are specifically sent away. Ishmael is not chosen, and he and his descendants become the world in opposition to the church. But all of that, really, you think that why are they so enemies of God? Well, it's just par for the course for humanity. It's just the way we are. We means we. It's the way we are, not for the grace of God. Fallen into sin, dead in our sins, always by nature choose against the Lord, choosing that he is not for us. As Genesis chapter 6, verse 5 says, always inclined to evil. So he's not to our taste. In our sin, we do not like or love him. In fact, we hate him. We hate him so much we would kill him if only we could get our hands on him. At the cross, we see what we would do. Don't blame any particular group of people. That's what we would do to God. If he did not first love and choose us, if he didn't, we'd be against him. We'd crucify him. At the cross, we see ourselves. We see this is what we would do. That left to ourselves, like the sons of Ishmael, we're hostile to God. We consider him not for us, not to our taste. We'll pass on the Jesus, give us more of ourselves. Thank you very much. We see that we are what that old-fashioned word says, we are a wretch. And once we've seen that, we see how desperately we need him. We need him not just kind of generally to make salvation available, like milk in a store, because if that were the case, it may be there, but we would never want it. We see that naturally we don't want him. We see that we desperately need specification, election. We need to be called. We need to be singled out of the world like Isaac. We need what Isaac got, for God first to say to us, like he did to him, I choose you. Otherwise, we will not choose him. We need for him to be for us, even when we were against him. We need grace.